HSMAI, she should have, but they should have put them out in the lobby or someplace where people would have felt more comfortable getting pictures with them.
Right.
Than just being on stage. I mean, they had an impact on stage. They looked great on stage. It made the stage really pop. But letting people know maybe between sessions, hey, come up on stage and get your picture with the logo. You know, I think that would have created a little bit more social engagement had they solicited that. I think so.
I should be embarrassed being on screen like this. Can we get Tammy on the camera?
Does Tammy want to jump on?
She's
Tammy,
waiting to get on.
She's typing.
Okay. I'm gonna turn her on and see.
No, thank you. Oh, what a brat! She said no.
What?
So I may have missed the New York HSMAI, but I did attend an HSMAI event.
The one I was supposed to do that didn't.
The one that Lauren was supposed to speak at, until I pointed out to him that he can't be in New York and Orlando at the same time.
But he's the sorcerer. Of course, he could have figured it out.
Yeah, he could be two places. Yeah. No, that didn't. But you were mentioning the fact that, and you told me that the guy did, really well.
He did a great job.
Great points.
Yeah.
And there was about how many people were there?
Over 30.
Kudos to Central Florida.
Yeah.
Nowadays getting 30 people to take half a day out of their time or a portion of their time is no small feat. So
the other thing I found interesting is it was at a Hilton Garden Inn that had over 5,000 feet of beautiful meeting space and full catering.
Wow.
Which would never have thought a Hilton Garden Inn would have that.
Huh. Hey, Lex. Hello, Lex. You want to get on the show, Lex? Because we just now that we know you and have met you, we told you
that Lauren had all sorts of fans coming up to him.
He's a star.
He's totally a star.
It was fun. As always, it's fun. I mean, it's enjoyable again to see everybody and to be able to talk to everybody.
Are we going to dish about the content or dish about?
Well, yeah. No, we're talking about
the
content. Yeah.
Stuart just popped on.
I mean, he just woke out of sobriety, or he just
exactly.
Stuart had. I got to confess though, and this I'm still surprised that some people are still talking to me because, and Ed, I think I mentioned this to you already. So I was the one that was the ringmaster of trying to get anybody to get around for dinner because I always looked at it, and I remember this from my earliest days. You go to these conferences and you kind of know people, but you don't know people, and you meet people, and unless you got clients that you got to be obligated to go see, everybody's like, yeah, and then all of a sudden you're left alone in that evening. So I always make it a point forever to run around and going, I don't know you, but we're having dinner somewhere, and if you want to join, come on in, and let's just have dinner. You know what I mean?
And then what did you do?
Then I went to Hamilton. Oh, I'm sorry. Brag rights. No.
I mean, Lauren, first of all, you never turn down excellent seats to Hamilton. I don't care what the situation is. Now, that gets brought up another level after you told me that you've never been to a show on Broadway.
I'm
you
forever
had to do it.
I'm forever spoiled.
Yeah. You're going to be sorely disappointed when you go to the second one.
Yeah, because for me, it was. I mean, even when I was trying to describe it to Renee when we were coming back from the airport, I was still getting goosebumps trying to talk about what it was like. Hey, Tammy, you decided to join.
Tammy figured it out. You looked at my face and hair and thought, I can get on.
That's Speaking of face and hair, Stuart Butler.
Hello. How's everybody?
Mr. Stuart, what is that fine-looking plaque behind you, sir?
Oh, this you say?
Yes.
This is a very special thing that I got at the.
Look at that.
Thank you, Lauren.
Oh no, it was just I was very happy to be able to lug those along. It was like, yes, indeedy.
I have one too, but I don't know where it is.
Still probably sitting in the suitcase yet, probably.
Exactly.
It's the only award I've ever received in my entire life. So.
And Stuart, I see you're still dressed for the HSMAI event.
No, actually, I dressed way down from this. I had a board meeting. I'm the chair of the Myrtle Beach CVB Marketing Council this year. So, because apparently I didn't have enough on my plate with HSMAI. But so I had a week of HSMAI, flew back last night, and then I had an early morning meeting at the chamber. And so I had to wear my big boy clothes. So there you
we have to give deference that Tammy is the newestly minted top 25 most influent.
Extraordinary.
Sales and marketing. Look at that piece of hardware.
Congratulations.
Congrats, Tammy.
Unlike
Well
Holly,
earned,
I
well deserved.
unpacked my award last night.
Do you have a sash though? I have a sash that I can send you. You can wear this year. It
Yeah.
says top 25 most extraordinary.
Lotier,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So did they go over doing like body search, because that's like 10 pounds of solid metal?
I checked my luggage. I didn't even use it.
Very cool. Very cool.
My husband looked at it last night and went, "Oh wow, that's aluminum." Oh, wow. And then some number like 6'2". He was very impressed with the quality of the material of the award.
Not the award itself, just the
Yeah.
actual award. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Well-
Maybe HSMAI changed its manufacturer then, because if you get a gold Adrian, they're really poorly built.
Oh, you're kidding.
Oh no, like they're really bad. Really, really bad.
You want
That's
to
terrible.
mention that anything at all? You want to say anything about that? No?
Well, I will be able to either confirm or deny that accusation very shortly when we receive not one but two of our two gold aliens that we won this year. So
Yeah, that's
I don't have the physical statue yet.
So
when
the
that
ones
comes
they
in.
give you to take photos with at the event are beautiful. The ones you get in the mail are really rough.
Oh, see,
really rough.
he's just yanking on your chain, Stuart. They're awesome.
No.
They're
Yeah, there's
awesome.
always haters. Haters gonna hate.
Hey,
The haters gonna hate,
I believe that's what you said to me the last time I gave you some information on receiving Adrian Awards.
Okay, so since we have four of us in attendance from the conference, what are some takeaways from it all? I mean, there was some really.
And my
Really
biggest takeaway is that Lauren's opinion of a good presentation and mine are completely opposite.
Oh yeah, we did not agree. He was.
For example,
The English lady that presented the this plus
You were
this
biased because
equals
she has
this.
the same New Guinea accent that you did.
No, I thought I like, I guess the reason is I like things that make me think or aren't presenting something I could present, right? It's something that's new and makes me broaden my horizons. And she made me do that. And Lauren was sitting there saying, I didn't answer a single one of those questions. And he was really grumpy about it because it was, like, what do you get when you cross housekeeping and something else? And it was, I don't know. I thought it was novel. It was something I hadn't seen before, and it made me think outside the box. So it checked a lot of the boxes that I look for.
So Lauren,
did
what
agree,
was your
Tammy.
problem with this presentation?
Well, to me, it was too esoteric.
Right.
It was too. I don't know where you're trying to get to. And if you would ask me, if you wanted to put me on the spot and say, answer this question in front of this audience, I couldn't give you an answer because I didn't know where you were going.
That
with it.
wasn't the
I
point.
never
of it.
knew the direction of the conversation.
if I could interject, I felt the same way as both of you. I liked the concept, but she didn't do a great job of sort of framing it. Had she done a little bit better job of framing it,
Yeah.
I'm guessing everybody would have loved it. I do agree with you, Stuart. It really did sort of make you think, but I just wish she would have framed it a little bit
And,
better.
and it's tough, right? To be fair, it was one of these 6 minute and 40-second
Yes.
presentations, right? So those are, and Tammy can attest, those are, because she did one and she did a good one on
Yep.
Google Zero Click, but it's tough to get a message across in 6 minutes and 40 seconds or 7 minutes.
Tammy did it.
Yeah.
I thought Tammy's was fantastic, and I'm really not just saying that. 'cause-
And well timed. By the way, Tammy, you don't know this, but the people at my table, I was just pontificating about Google Zero and all this, and Stuart was downplaying me as being, oversaturated and tangent based and squirrely and so forth and so on.
I
And then
just
you
said
come up
people
on
only
stage-
understand 70% of what you say. That's all.
and then you come up on stage, and I felt like turning around going, mic drop. Boom.
That's funny. You know what's really funny about Tammy's, and not to detract from her because she did a great job, but I had presented on Zero Click the day before for the resort roundtable session, and it was funny. We sat next to each other at dinner that night, and I was telling Tammy some of our slides were almost identical in terms of, like, even I had an ostrich with the head in the sand slide, and she had one as well. So it was very funny. So I don't know if it's great minds think alike or fools really differ, but we were very similar in our take on it.
Can I speak up here too?
Uh-huh.
So I went to
Voice.
Milestones Engage conference in July,
Mhm.
and Heard Rand Fishkin introduced us.
That's
And
amazing.
so Yeah. And so I've been bugging Tammy since then to do, more stuff around it because I think it's so fascinating. And then I sent you Rand's stuff last week, which I'm assuming drove the HSMAI thing. So really it was Milestones Engaged that really it was Rand Fishkin that kind of sparked this, but it's fascinating content. He is a conspiracy theorist, certainly, but he happens to be right.
Yeah, he and Ed would get on really well.
I like conspiracy theories.
Do you like
That's why
Rand
you get on
Fishkin?
really well.
Yes.
By the way, not to take the topic, but did everyone see the article yesterday about how Google will now not put how they used to do the featured snippet and then you would also be the first organic result, that they're changing that and you're no longer going to be the first organic result?
I did not see that.
Yeah, and what's weird is, because one of the things Rand had pointed out previously is you don't necessarily have to be the number one ranked organic to be the featured snippet, right? They showed examples where you could be fourth or fifth or stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves now, and are they only going to pick the number one result? I don't know. It's going to be, because that was a huge advantage of having the featured snippet. You're kind of double dipping on the SERP.
You know what it kind of reminds me of,
Thanks,
and
Tammy, for the article.
yeah, thank you, Timmy, for putting the article up for it. Is all my trips to China, I had to get used to one cultural difference, and that was when you first showed up in China. There's so many people. They don't try to, when they put you in a line, they don't really put you in a line. They just keep making the access smaller and smaller and smaller that people have to go through to get somewhere. And so at first, when you get off the plane, you're at the airport, you're kind of going in the direction that everyone else is going, and the doorway, you're thinking, you start forming this natural line. We all get very courteous to each. I stand behind you because you're ahead of me. You stand behind them because they're ahead of you. And the Chinese people just like, if you're going to slow down, I'm going to speed up. I'm just going to keep on going until I can't go anymore. And then I get into this narrow line. And the reason why I bring this up is I feel like Google's doing that with us. That we're all going in one direction, and all they do is keep narrowing where we can get through to get where we want to go, where organically now it's about what they're putting as primary content, what they're putting as primary things, relationship, and we keep getting pushed back because we're not pushing hard enough forward to get in front of things. Now, as you pointed out, being number one doesn't mean being number one. It just means you're just there momentarily compared to anything else, and you're below everything else that got ahead of them because it chose to. And it's just kind of weird that, Google keeps redefining the fact that no matter how good we get, hey, Lily, that we keep getting behind other things because they keep putting things in front of us. It's just, I don't know. It's just, they're driving us to doing content. They're driving us to do, but they want us to give us their money.
But that is the thing. I mean, they are driving us to do better content.
Yes.
Well, and not just content, but also technical. Like if you look at back when Mobilegeddon was going on, and this is something Rand talked about in his presentation too, was Google was saying, hey, you're going to get penalized if your site isn't this speed, if it doesn't have the mobile friendly tag, you're going to disappear from the SERP. And they kept saying that and saying that. And the result was it went from about 60% of all websites had the mobile friendly tag to right around Mobilegeddon, that 2 months, the month before, the month after, went to 85% of all sites were now what Google considers mobile friendly. So, the area that the content was in, no big pop-ups, faster load times, all that stuff that's better for consumers, Google forced us to do it. And it was a good thing, ultimately.
So can I ask then about the new Hilton brand site? Have you experienced it?
I have not.
So you gotta. So I forget what it's called. Tammy, the one hit wonder, it's a one pager.
Yeah.
It's not rolled out to every brand hotel. It is lightning fast. There's very little schema and hardly any content.
Because that's the answer.
Yeah.
But it is lightning fast.
You know what travelers in Google want less of? Information.
Hey, Google's okay if you provide less information because it just means that the consumer is going to use a Google product to make the decision even more. So ultimately what they want.
So everybody's up in arms about the no information, and obviously what they were going for was speed. But I was curious what you all's take on it was.
So
Well, I figure
I
people
don't
are
know.
just going to go to Hilton regardless if they want to go to Hilton. I don't think anybody Googles hotels near me and they're like, oh, what's this Hilton thing? I don't know what that is.
yeah, but see, the problem with that is that actually does happen through search because most of the Hilton hotels are no longer allowed to have vanity sites, but
True,
they are
for
deploying
individual
their
hotels.
they're deploying their own spend. And they're directing that spend like good soldiers to the very skinny page that they have on Hilton. Listen, it's like anything in technology. It's a balancing act. You shouldn't go too hard into one metric or another. One that I used to always use internally, especially when we were working on Ezeal taking it PCI compliant, was the balance of security versus user experience. The most secured server is the one you never plug in. Problem is you're not using it. then.
Not using it.
Right. So you work backwards, and that's probably what Hilton is doing. I mean, let's not forget they're trying to get out from underneath a very monolithic stack that they need to chip away at some point. So I'm sure speed was the first thing, and now going back and figuring out how do you layer in, I don't know,
Okay.
information.
So let me ask this question for those who were, well, everybody but Ed, I guess. How weird was it to see Sean Paley and crew from Marriott at the conference after so many years of being dark?
Did you talk to him?
Yeah, he embraced me like I was a long lost brother, and before I
He's
couldn't
been
get the time
busy.
of day from him. I'm like, we
has
used to be
been-
buddies. We used to go, drink
He
together
has
and hang
been-
out.
He has been busy doing really good stuff. I'm
It's
totally
not that
fine.
he has. I'm not saying that, but Marriott has given the snub for years to the conference. Yes, they have. Yes, they have. I will fight that to the end. They have not shown up for 4 years that I can count, and then they show up as if they were just like long lost week. I just thought really weird.
And they won a few Adrians this year too. So I wonder if that
Marriott always wins Adrian's.
do they
Yeah.
usually go to the gala?
They send
Yes.
a bunch of
Okay.
property people and quasi
Jeremy.
important people.
Tammy, are you not going to speak up to this?
No.
It's very
So-
smart.
I have no
Sammy,
opinion.
that's a very smart reaction.
Yeah, I'm just like, why now? And why so happy to be here? And gosh golly, and what you doing? And
You know
how's
why
things-
they showed up? They watched this show and they heard how we were saying that
Ed, you
Mark
love
gives
him.
the best hugs.
Right.
You love
Yeah.
conspiracy theories. This is a great conspiracy
have-
theory premise.
We've always had a Marriott person on the board. And you know what? It's the person on the board, I think, that drives the engagement. We were just talking about that. Remember we had that fantastic Sean person from Google?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Robert
He
or
was-
George.
no, no,
something.
Perhaps this is
These
why
names.
people aren't really driven to come, is their fellow board members can't even remember their names.
I'm not on the
It
board.
was like
but
4 years ago. It was like
That's
4 years
years
ago.
I'm-
But he was phenomenal, and he
Sean,
would
he
bring
was
us
also
great
Sean.
information.
He was
Yeah,
also
everybody
Sean.
knows. Right. But Sean Paley was on the board, whose name I remember. And so as a result, Marriott was a little bit more engaged. And then I think the next person that we had just wasn't engaged. We have, oh man, now I can't remember her first name, but her last name is Stitch. She's on the board and she's in PR for Marriott. She's very engaged and she is fascinating. And she presented.
And
That
again,
makes
I'm going to recommend maybe the board does little like networking events so you guys can remember each other's names. I'm just gonna say. I'm
It's
sorry.
just me. Oh,
This is
Ed,
problematic.
it's just me. Everybody else,
Lauren
we do
too.
tons of networking and I know them, but do you know how many people were at that conference who I taught in a class? Like I had a class of 15 people and I loved every one of them and I couldn't tell you one of their names.
Hey, speaking of which,
Yeah.
why didn't they push your class coming up, the webinar stuff?
Oh
I
gosh.
tried to get Holly and Dan to Kanye West to the stage and just go.
Yeah.
We
wouldn't
had
do it.
we had stuff everywhere. They've been doing emailers. We're
People
almost
don't read
full.
the things on the table.
We're
You
almost
needed to stand in front of that audience. I told you.
We're
that.
almost full for our first class. I think we have like 3 spots left. And we've already gotten a couple of companies that want to hire us to do the class for their own. So we're good.
Excellent.
It's a yeah, I'm
I
very
think
happy
though,
with
I think Holly, you would have had probably even better adoption if you had just said the digital marketing course done by Mama Bear, you would have had much better adoption. Everybody wants to be there for Mama Bear.
Well, after Dan threatened to sue me because I didn't mention that I was casting him as Papa Bear, and Lauren was so cute as Baby
I
Bear.
did a little baby bear. That was pretty cute.
And whoever did not attend the marketing conference is completely lost.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
Ed's looking very confused right now.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say,
Holly did this great Goldilocks program that was really, I mean, and the nuances in her slides were just laugh out funny. They just the stuff she put in the slides were just.
I don't think people could see. So it was about personalization. You had to choose between Family Values Hotel, which I restrained myself very much for the stuff I wanted to put. And then I had Loose Morals Hotel. But I don't know if everybody saw what happens in Vegas can usually be treated with antibiotics type
Right.
tagline.
Did so many little
I
things
got
on
it
it.
all. It was great.
Thank you.
yeah, she had
It was
Naked
amazing.
Tuesdays as part of the personalization.
What was that?
You had the Naked Tuesdays as part of
Yes,
the
Naked Tuesday.
Naked Tuesdays.
And Kelly McGuire was Goldilocks, and
Yeah.
that was also pretty perfect. She's a riot. I can't believe she chose that split-second format or lightning round format to talk about predictive analytics and AI, and
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
it was
I was
fantastic.
biased though because she had a lot of Star Wars in there, so I mean,
Yeah, yeah, these are the doors. Yeah, she did good with it.
Well, she had
The
Star
last,
and Star Trek, right? So it was like
yeah, she did. Yeah, there was a balance.
Yeah.
Data showed up.
Data, yeah.
the keynote guy was interesting. The starting keynote guy was interesting. He brought some good points to the table for it. I thought that he had that. The whole. I think the pivot moment for me was when he said he was going to was going to start writing this book about courage, which I can show the book off because they gave us all a copy of him. Was the astronaut when the astronaut went to sit down with him and he was trying to think of what's the best first not stupid question. There it is. Return on courage. That the astronaut flipped the tables on him and said, "What qualifies you to go and write a book about courage?" And he's like, yeah, it was that neat juxtaposition.
I see. I took a different point of that. What he said, right? I heard it different the way he said it. I didn't think it was that she was flipping it on him. I think he interpreted her question to him differently, and then realized she meant it a different way. He first interpreted it as,
Right.
"Who are you? Why do you? What you don't deserve this." That's how he took it. But then he realized she was probing him for him to really dig deep and figure out why. You know, it wasn't like a criticism. It was
No, I didn't think it was a
encouragement.
criticism. I'm sorry. When I say flip on it, it was a question that was a surprise to him.
Yeah.
The way he was approaching the conversation. I didn't mean it that she was being, like, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Just it rocked him on what am I going with this? What am I doing with this? What's the purpose of
Our
this?
brains were completely different, man, because I heard it completely different.
Everybody's
You and I were
brain
sitting at
works
the same
differently
table,
than
And
Lauren.
we're doing the appraisal of the 6-minute stuff, and we're looking at each other, and he's going like this, and I'm going like this. Tammy, you're the only one we agreed on, all right? Just so for the record, you're the only one we agreed on was rock solid.
We're
Everybody
gonna win
else,
like this with you, Tammy.
I agree. That's what we need to hear again.
That's funny.
yeah, no, it's fun. Yeah, Stuart and I were definitely on different planets when it came to whether this was good, this was bad. I mean, we would have been nasty judges. He would have been Simon Cowell from New Guinea, and I would have been.
I had to
Howie
ask
on the other end. I'd
him
been Howie.
yesterday. I had to ask Stuart yesterday, where do you live again? Because now I just don't know. All I ever hear is New Guinea and Australia. And the
Well, you can't
UK.
tell by his accent that he lives in South
Yeah,
Carolina.
no. I literally had 4 different people ask me if I was Australian, including one that had lived in Australia for years.
Yes.
So,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah,
pretty good.
no, and Stephanie did a great job with her presentation on her breakout. It was funny because she came back up to me at the end of it and she said, "Did you ask me questions?" Like, yeah, a couple of them. She said, "Man, I was like so into the zone." She was like so focused. She said, "Did you get video of me?" He's like, "Did you not see the 10-foot pole stuck in your face?"
Yeah, she's
Literally.
great.
yeah, she does a good job.
But yeah, she did a great job with it because it's weird. It's like you see similar questions every year. You see the emergence of people waking up to stuff. It's never dull. It's never we get to go over and say, oh, we talk about the same topics or we refer to the same things, but there's a waking up of people as they come into their own of understanding what all the moving pieces are. The same questions from different people. And you might sit there going, oh, geez, are we ever going to get this right? And you're like sitting, this is the process. This is the way that people become aware that these things are affecting their business, that this is something they need to understand, if not to do, but to at least understand to find out what they need to do. It's just amazing to watch these people waking up. I kind of look at it when they used to teach sailing, where the boom's banging on their head, they can't get it right, and all of a sudden that magic moment where the wind hits the sail, they understand by trimming the rudder, and all of a sudden this light in their face, like, that's how that works. And you see that in these conferences. You see people when they see something said, and they're like, that's what that is. It's pretty cool.
That's what I think is so cool about these conferences. One takeaway that I had from my conversations with people is there's a lot going on between revenue management and marketing in terms of who's going to run the show. Did you guys get that when you talk to people? There's going to be the two roles are converging, and one's going to be the leader.
Yeah,
And
but some people are copping out, and rather than picking one, they're just putting someone in charge of both, right? Like a chief commercial officer or something like that, and then they both.
I don't consider that a cop out. I actually think that's a fairly strong
I think that's
strategy.
actually smart. Yeah, there was actually an article. I forget if it was last week or the week before. We didn't really get a chance to chat about it, but in the article, Sloan Dean had commented on the future of hospitality, and I'm going to go ahead and take credit for giving him this idea because I talked about it on the show a few weeks before this came out. So clearly, he's just quoting me.
clearly,
that basically,
Sloan's like that. He just copied that to everybody. He's not
exactly. He has no original ideas. No, he's a brilliant guy.
Vanilla.
But it was validation for me to see that his thought process was very similar, which is basically that we're going to have one chief strategy officer who oversees the strategy. And then you're going to have people who oversee the technical aspects of implementing that strategy in more of the traditional revenue marketing and whatnot. But when you've got three different people creating three separate strategies and they're not converging the way that they should, that's where all of our problems really lie. And if we have one chief strategy officer, naturally the goals are going to be aligned as well because they're going to be the goals set with the strategy. And so I think that rather than a cop-out, I would see that is actually the way that things should be heading.
So here's why I think it's a cop-out, right? Because if you look at every other industry, marketing means something different in this industry than it does everywhere else. Like marketing to everyone else is all the functions that you put together to bring a product to market, including price being a part of that and merchandising being a part of that. So I think to put someone from a revenue perspective in charge of it all in saying that they're in charge of marketing strategy and revenue strategy is probably not the smartest thing. So I think you've got to find someone that understands the holistic view of it. And that should probably be a marketer, not a revenue person or a salesperson.
Oh, not a salesperson? I was going to speak up for the salesperson. I think the cop-out part is that they're just giving it to their best person.
Yeah.
I met somebody at the sales leadership conference who was just handed, she was a revenue manager, and she was handed marketing, sales, and revenue management. And when was that? 3 months ago? I saw her at the digital marketing conference, and I said, how's it going? Oh, great, da-da-da-da-da. I mean, I gave up sales. I gave those people back, but then I thought, okay.
Because they don't understand all aspects. And that's why I say it's a cop-out, because they're arbitrarily picking their favorite, putting them in a new title and assuming that's magically going to fix everything. And it's not.
Yeah, that I completely agree with. I think if you're already in a siloed organization, you probably need fresh blood from the outside, somebody who has proven that they can create a holistic strategic plan. And it really doesn't eliminate any positions. That's the other thing. If you elevate one person to that chief strategy officer and you don't replace their original position, maybe they are qualified. In some cases, that they may actually have that holistic strategy view and be ready for that promotion. I think that's probably only 10% of cases. But it's got to be somebody who understands the sales and the marketing and the revenue management Right. They don't necessarily need to know how to load a backlink on the website. They don't need to have the technical expertise to execute every single thing, but they do need to understand the reason for it, where it fits into the strategy, and be able to kind of speak to that as a whole.
Okay, that brings up a topic on one of the keynote speakers that bothered me that we as an industry have turned our back on. They highlighted the fact of Zappos. Remember when they were talking about Zappos? You know, you can take a tour of Zappos and look at what they did. First thing Zappo does is they make you work out the customer service lines, so forth and so on. And to me, that is very reminiscent of us as an industry bringing people through the rank. Before you can lead, you have to learn how to follow. And before you can follow, you have to learn what you're doing. And so bringing managers in, I always made them work in every department. And not because I came up with that idea. It's because that's how I was brought in. If I want to get out of what brought me into the industry, and if I was going to lead other departments, I had to know what those departments did by doing what those departments did. I had to work in engineering and housekeeping and everything else, so that when it came time to lead, people follow because they know when you're asking them to do something that they appreciate the perspective that you know what you're asking them to do, not just because you have the authority to tell them. And
Right.
so I thought the Zappos example was true to form. Yes, that's great. And then hypocritically, in reverse, we're talking about, as we just said, placing people in positions without the knowledge, skills, and firsthand experience of what they're leading. So we're hypocritical when we say we put people in places like that.
I would counter, Lauren, that it's sort of a little bit of both. So if you're waiting to find somebody who has run the gamut, knows everything about digital marketing because they've worked in that department, knows everything about sales because
It's a
they've worked in
unicorn.
that department, and knows it's not going to happen. Like
No.
nothing's ever going to get accomplished. So I think that it's very important, though, that when somebody is brought into that role, number one, they should have a background in at least one, preferably two of the disciplines, and have a
Agreed.
strong understanding of it, have taken the time to educate themselves so they at the very least have a grasp on the theory, even if they haven't personally, and built a rate code or created a backlink or closed a sales contract. If they haven't done one of those particular things, they should still, if they're a leader, they will automatically take the time to sit for a week with each department, understand what goes through what's going on in that department, see where some of the roadblocks are and what they're hearing from each thing. It's something that we do when we do a consulting assessment. We do something very similar, not for a full week, but we sit down with each person in each department individually to understand their unique perspective before you put them in a room where they're all sort of incentivized to make it sound like they're on the same page, whether or not they really are.
I agree with you. We're looking for a unicorn. To say that somebody is prepped and ready that has expertise in all disciplines before they can rise to the challenge of running all of them is looking for the one needle in the haystack. But to your point, I agree. They need to have the knowledge of what they're in charge of. And it goes to the same thing. A great leader also surrounds themselves with people better at what they do than they can do themselves.
Right.
But you have to appreciate that. You have to know what it is you're asking them to do. And as you said, experiencing it, running through with it, and knowing it, because each person is going to give their advice based on their particular discipline of interest. They're always going to be a biased opinion when it comes to preferences if they're not in charge of all of them.
And I think that this brings up a major gap that we have in the industry right now. There's no sort of clear training program or career path because I think, digital marketing is kind of where revenue management was 10 years ago. It's starting to just now get a seat at the table. Sales and revenue have had a seat at the table for years, whether or not they were reporting to each other and whatnot are, something for a different discussion. But digital marketing is relatively new. And so we're not going to find as many people with that deep background that also know the other disciplines. So I actually, shameless plug for HSMAI at the moment, they're testing out their new CHBA, Certified Hospitality Business Acumen, something along those lines. And I definitely signed up to beta that because I'm curious to understand, will they be using this to kind of converge multiple disciplines in a strategic way? Like, here's how you set a strategy. For example, I don't know how many of you were able to go to the talk that Amy Infante gave from GetGo, but she was talking about how most of us focus on the 0 to 3 month group booking window, but in reality, it's about 24 months. And Holly, I know you talk about this in your training as well. And so where does the sales come in? Where does the marketing come in? Where does the PR come in? And actually looking at it as sort of a calendar position, because really revenue management is probably the shortest term discipline in many cases. We may set things further out, but that's not when people are converting. So it's kind of just there to be there for 10% of maybe the people who are actually booking that far out. But I'm curious to know if the CHBA, the way that they're designing it, will converge that a little bit more into a strategic timeline.
It's a fantastic class. I've actually taken the in-person one, and I baited the single, the online, by yourself. I like it. It's going to help do what you're talking about. I mean, it certainly gives you a broader perspective, regardless of where it's a simulator.
Right.
It's a, you build the rates, you build the staffing, you build that. But what I love this class in the group setting is you were competing with other people, and you really got to learn how a mindset drove a strategy. And to me, that was really valuable. And in the single one, and I told this to the company that actually created it, it's just not the same because you don't get that sort of learning factor. You have to make it more clear the people that you're in a group with. If I were in a company, I would do this online version for my whole company and have the teams, be my different properties maybe. But just as a one-off, I think it's going to be really challenging to get so much out of it.
That's how I met
You'll
Fran.
like it.
That's how I met
Yeah,
Fran.
me too.
Yeah, because when we first went out, Fran and I, and so this is how she used to intro me for Rocket all the time. She talked about how we met is, okay, so we got into the simulation and I was me. Give me the computer. I'm the computer guy. Marketing. We're going to do all this. And first day, fail. And so it's a competition. We were competing against all the other teams. First day, we were the worst. Worst rev, worst everything, terrible. Second day, she's like, I'm in charge now. Boom, she takes it. Failure. Sales first, sales first, sales first. Failure. We go out drinking that night. Drinking solves everything, right, Stuart?
Stuart, he gave you some grief, man.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, publicly.
So we go out there drinking that. We're like, listen, this isn't working. Blah blah blah. We're at the bottom, and this is a 3-day program, and we're at the bottom of everything for 2 days. For us to even get into the ranking would be a miracle the next day. So we decided, let's put our heads together, okay? I know stuff, you know stuff, let's do something here. So we go through the simulation in compatibility. Not only did we get in the right, we in 1 day made up for all of our losses and killed everybody else and ran out number one. We in 1 day did what everybody else did for 3 days because we decided to start collaborating between what we were doing. So if any lesson from both of us, we're like, holy crap, this stuff really works, It's like, but no, it was a lot of fun. That's how I met Fran. Yeah.
It's a great program. The guys, when I took the class, the front runners were these guys from Abu Dhabi who set their rates at like $5,000, and it never occurred to the rest of us. So they really did pretty well initially.
They sold one room a day. So Tammy, with Milestone and everything else, I mean, you guys have so many fractions of things that you're doing because you control so many entity engagements in the process with everybody. How do you keep all the cats in one direction?
That's a great question. When I figure out the answer, I'll let you know. No, I think does a pretty good job of trying to figure out what is the right direction, what's the strategy, what should we be focusing on.
Who?
Our team, right? So, how do we keep that current? So, and how do we work with clients to make sure, so if we're talking about all these convergent things, like I know, like talking to Stuart and Lily, and of course, always Holly and Lauren at, HSN AI, how do we keep clients focused on the right direction, right? And so not just focusing on, the return on ad spend to one campaign, but thinking about things holistically. And yeah, if this campaign's about awareness, you're not going to see a 50-to-1 unless we want to start talking about display advertising and counting a 60-day to look back window. But that's a rant for another day. I wasn't prepared to be on this morning.
Wait. I do want to say rants are welcome.
What rants are welcome? You can rant
and encouraged, actually.
But so it's just it's a lot of different things. So anyway.
With that being said, any other takeaways from the conference that just seemed to pop for you? I mean, I got a pair of pink socks that I can't wear because they're size medium, and I seem to have larger feet than medium. But other than that, I actually like that idea, that sock thing that he was doing. Sock.
Oh,
cancer,
sock cancer, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat in that sense.
So I know you didn't like the last guy
No,
because he
did not
showed
like
up
the last guy.
so fast before the actual presentation.
Well, I got tainted. I got to be honest with you. I don't think his content was per se. First off, two things. One, he must have gone to your program, Holly, because it sounded very similar to the things that you talk about. Okay. Two, I don't like anybody that shows up 5 minutes before they're supposed to talk and then speed slides the stuff he didn't even have the courtesy to take out of his deck because he had a shorter time frame than the original deck was made for. Okay, to highlight a couple of points, and half of his conversation was based on we can't have time about that, and we can't talk about that now. We don't have time for this.
Go read my book.
Yeah, read my book, read my book, read my book. By the way, no template that we use for the entire conference that everybody has the courtesy of using. His signature stuff on the bottom the whole time, like sales pitch, sales pitch. Again, not that his
Brilliant.
content was bad, just you abbreviated, cut out half of it, speed dialed through it, and then had a couple of videos where you weren't even talking. How much do we pay you? I'm sorry. I'm being bitter.
Well, that was actually going to be my question: was he paid to be there?
Yeah, he was probably the paid for. Yeah, he was probably the paid for. And I'm
Oh.
sure it wasn't exactly cheap because everybody rants and raves about this guy. Because I even recognize his books, and I don't read other people's books as much. You guys, read this book, and I'm like, I don't read those guys' books because I don't know. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, back
You know
to
everything,
your question about what else we took away. I don't
Mhm.
know if she's a listener, but I have to give a shout out to Taylor. I think her last name is probably pronounced Shumati
Yes.
from Hogan
Yep.
Hospitality Group. She did a great recap of day one. I'm kind of waiting to see if she's going to do one of day two. I don't know. I'm hoping this link will work for all the viewers, but it's kind of ugly. But anyway, that should hopefully bring you to the PDF of her recap. And she did a really nice one-pager on Tammy's meta search talk, the Google talk, and the rule of 7+ from get-go. And I thought that was really very well done. So Taylor, if you're a listener, kudos. Thank you
Yeah.
for putting that together. But I thought that was really nice. And then from the main one, I was curious, did any of you go to the PR talk?
No.
I
That
did.
was that was Allison Stitch, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I did not, but one of my colleagues did and raved about it. Said it was actually a really good.
Really?
site. Yeah.
Nice.
She's the
Nice.
Yeah.
Marriott person.
Right, she is. I don't think she was in. She didn't participate in this one. I don't think this was JPR, Singapore Airlines, and I forget at the moment who the third person on the panel was. It was way upstairs on the 9th floor. But it was a great panel, and they were talking about all sorts of different ways that you can use PR to tell the story. And I wondered, they were talking about the Barcelona principle. I wondered if any of you had heard about that
No.
in PR. So apparently, I actually need to do a little bit more research on it myself. I haven't had a moment yet, but it is the 7 principles for the overarching framework for effective PR. And I found an article that I'll drop in here too for anybody who is
Thank you.
interested in reading more about it. But it takes away just kind of some of the fuzziness around attribution and talks a little bit more about how to align your goals for storytelling and things like that. So I thought that it was a really cool concept, and that came from the person from JPR in New York.
Nice. So,
Fantastic.
Stuart, you had a opinion about Google's presentation, but to tie it together with other things, Dean Schmidt with Derbysoft did again an excellent presentation on MetaSearch.
He's a very good presenter. I've not seen
Isn't
him
he?
present before.
He's clean. He's just his voice
Yeah.
is awesome. I mean, he just has
Yeah,
good.
and
He's
he
in
kind of has an
broadcasting.
angle. You know, he did this whole myth busting meta search, which is kind of novel, but he presented it really well. So I enjoyed that one. I think overall, one of the things I think I've said to a lot of you, I don't feel like there was a lot of like big ideas or new stuff in this conference this year. It was a lot of reinforcement of what we already knew. And his was one, right? It was one where, these are the fundamentals and foundational stuff, but it was good for everyone to hear that, but nothing was really innovative in it. But he did a good job.
Yeah, I think he did a good job putting MetaSearch in perspective of usability.
Yeah, and he answered
What
questions.
is the best ways of using it? Yeah. But the one thing that he did bring up that I got to go look at, and I was going to ask you about, I know that it's tied with AdWords and so forth, but from a filtering point of view, he was adamant about the fact that we now have the ability through Google Ads to create the audience requirements for the Meta,
Right. Yeah.
which is crazy to think that you can do that, because usually Meta is the big lever. Is it on? Is it off? And how much we turn on with it. And here now all of a sudden you can create nuance to it on Google Hotels, not all aspects, but Google
Yeah,
Hotels.
and you still can't do keywords and things like that, but you can at least do custom audiences. So you can create a list of people that come to your site and target them specifically. So yeah, it's definitely, there's been some hiccups since Google Hotel Ads is getting rolled into Google Ads. It's not complete, and I'd say it's a little clunky right now. Some of the attribution is different, and we saw a loss in attribution from when we went from the true native Google Hotel Ads platform to Google Ads. So we've had some hiccups along the way, but I think ultimately it's going to give us a more refinable tool. So yeah, if anyone's not doing Google Hotel Ads, absolutely they should be doing Google Hotel Ads.
And by the way,
Absolutely.
compliments to your team member, Ben. He's like oil and water for you, dude.
Why do I
You and
say-
I are ranting, raving, bouncing around, and Ben's like, dude, just flat level. He's a fun guy. It was nice to see him.
he had a good time at the show, and he had a lot of good conversations with a lot of folks. So that was our first time doing a table, and I think it was a good investment for us this year. So yeah.
Was it? I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I wasn't at the table a whole lot. I was going into the different things and had to help moderate Bob's session. So there was some times I was away, but he said that it's probably from a quality of conversation one of the best shows we've ever done. So yeah, proof
I'll tell you
was
what,
in the pudding, right? Was turning the business, but he felt like it was strong.
So, Tim, you guys have always had a table there pretty much that I can remember. I really appreciated Kelly being adamant about the suitcasing, because that was one thing that I had a problem with in the past couple of years. Is it got a little loose that people were really walking and talking around with their cards that didn't pay to have the privilege to do that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really nice for Kelly to lay down the line saying, if you found, we're going to kick your butt out, because I thought
Apparently it didn't always work.
Yeah, there were a few cases still.
Yeah, there was still a little bit of that going on, including we actually got hit up at our booth by someone.
Mhm.
I kind of felt bad with the person. I was like, oh, I gotta go, and I pretty much walked away.
Well, I mean, I guess there's no way to actually ever stop the totalness of that, but I
That
like
was
the
a little bit crazy, though. Tammy was like, sort of bad mouthing the salesperson. I said, Tammy, you can't bad mouth salespeople. And she was like, they were at my booth trying to sell to me. Like, that is insane. And I thought, that's legit.
Mhm.
Yeah, no. Anything that you adamantly disagreed with that was presented? Anything that was just like, oh hell no?
Well, didn't you, Lauren? You want to talk about the loyalty one? Because I know you basically called the presenter out during the session.
You did not.
I did.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the professor, I call her Dr. Donna. Donna, who's the chair of the hospitality for the New York College for Hospitality, the New York University, sorry, NYU. She was moderating one guy didn't even show up from Marriott, which anyway, there was three others. One from Vegas, one from Preferred, one from American Hotels or something. Anyway, and they were pontificating about their loyalty programs and soft selling themselves perpetually and so forth. And I just, and it's funny because Tammy from Wyndham was sitting with me. And she says, you don't like them. And I'm like, mm-mm. And so I just raised and says, what are you talking about? You're not talking about loyalty. You're talking about programs and retention and capture. And you've already self-proclaimed that you copycat each other like lemmings. And you're talking about frequency programs and nothing about loyalty. Loyalty is showing up to a place not because there's dirt on the floor and peanuts and warm beer and bad service. It's because you're there because you like being there. And nothing you're doing tells me that you're making people want to like to be with you. All you're talking about is giving them rewards and kudos and presents, whether they want it now or later. So what are you doing about loyalty? And it started the conversation. They didn't answer it, though. At the end of the day, they didn't really answer it.
I did have
wasn't that
to
mean about it
also
either. Yeah.
I had to
just-
also kind of, sorry, go ahead. I didn't
No,
mean
no,
to.
no, no. I mean, I wasn't that mean about when I asked him about it, but I was trying to just hold him to the point of what are you really trying to do with all this program? I know we're a business, we're trying to create business, but how are you guest centric with all the things you're saying you're doing? Because you're not,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. So I think that another one that I had to challenge was actually in the attribution. It started out great. There were some really good metrics. I shared some stuff on LinkedIn about it. And then she went into a very lengthy case study about why national TV ads were the best place to spend your money. And at the end of her case study, I was like, so for those of us who don't really use national TV ads because it's, not realistic, what do you think drove the fact that national TV was so good? So I was trying to kind of give her an out and say, was it because it's a visual? Was it because it's a video? And that's really important right now, like trying to help her make it kind of relate to anybody in the room who wasn't, like I saw Christy Goodshow from Preferred, and that's a great case study for her company for sure. But I think that it just didn't relate to most people in the room. And she said, well, if you don't have a budget for it, definitely video is good, but you really should create a budget for national TV ads if you're a national brand. And I'm like,
You get
well,
on
yeah,
that.
but that's not really, it's not about the budget. It's more about, an individual hotel's not going to create national TV ads. It doesn't make sense. So it would have been nice if it was a little bit more tailored to the audience in that one. It's all great information. It just probably didn't apply to 75% of people in the room.
Well, and that's what bugged me with the last guy too that talked, because he didn't even change his dialogue from guest. He kept referring to them as customers and clients in his
Right.
presentation that he was abbreviating. It's like you didn't even tailor it to the fact you're talking to hoteliers, and he couldn't
Right.
even say the word core correctly, which was weird. And Ed disappeared. What? They're dropping like flies.
Over here. What's going on?
Lauren, are you pushing buttons again back there?
No, I'm not touching nothing.
Holly's mic again.
Well,
Yeah.
she was supposed to be back.
Muting
She's
Holly
there
again.
somewhere. But yeah, it was kind of weird in that sense. Hey, Stuart, I was going to ask you a question. Who are we pontificating with about attribution theft is real? And we were like, who are we jabbering about that with?
I remember the conversation. It may or may not have been after a couple of beers, so I'm having trouble remembering who we were having that conversation with.
Stuart, you may have missed the beginning of the show. I already have open bidding for the pictures of you having way too much fun.
I was well behaved. I was.
Oh, it wasn't the behavior. It was just the look in your eye and the smile on your face.
I probably drank too many glasses of wine at the board directors of the CMO dinner, but I didn't
Hey, how
Wait,
fun was that?
drink anything at the piano bar.
Oh yeah, what'd you guys do? What was the dinner
was
for
good.
We went to
board.
we went to this place called the Ivy.
Yeah, Ivy Lane.
116
Yeah.
East 60th. West 60th.
Yeah.
West 60th. I don't know.
Oh, that's
The food was fantastic, but the actual evening was kind of a blast. And I was talking with some people about it, and we think the board is a lot younger than it used to be. And so maybe that's why it was so much fun, which I, of course, should be offended about. But it was much less serious. I mean, my table talked about marketing all night long. So it's not like we were talking about, stuff, but it was a blast. It was
Good.
a lot of fun. Did you have fun at your table, Tammy? And you two were at the same table.
We were at the same table. So other than
Yeah,
Stuart, kidding.
we-
No, I was a great time, and I know you had a ton of great people at your table too. I loved the evening. Great conversations, great stuff.
That ESA guy is smart.
Which one?
The ESA guy, John.
Oh yes, fantastic conversations. I hit a point about halfway through though, where like all of the 2 days events and the fact that the lightning round and everything was over kind of hit, and for about 10 minutes, I was just kind of like, okay, I'm done.
That was the 10 minutes I was talking to her. She just zoned down.
Yeah.
I think it was before you got there. I didn't call you out, but Stuart was a few minutes late to.
Yeah, I would say a few. It was like 63 minutes late, I think is what it was. I rolled in just after 8, which, yeah, my bad. Fashionably late. That was not entirely my fault. I knew I was going to be a bit late because I left some other folks around 7 thinking oh, how far is this restaurant going to be? Maybe 10-minute walk. It'll be fine. I'll be there by 7:15. It never starts on time. So then I get a call from a client. And I wasn't paying attention to my GPS. And I walked 10 minutes in the wrong direction. And now I'm 40 minutes away from the restaurant. And it's already, I don't know, 7:15. So then I call an Uber. The Uber ends up, I was on 43rd Street. The Uber ended up coming to 45th Street for some reason. And it took me 20 minutes to find the Uber. And then finally, the traffic was awful. So I rolled in at like 8:05, I think. Yeah. But still enjoyed it. It was good. I just had to eat from a little plate because they never gave me a big plate. That was my punishment.
Oh, at 8:05, I was okay. Never mind.
That's funny.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lauren. I forgot I'm not speaking to you.
That's
so
right.
That's going to make
I
the rest
love
of the
that
show really
I
awkward.
I said, "Oh, I'm dead to Lily." She says, "You're dead to me."
Hamilton is by far my absolute favorite show in the entire
I have never.
world. I went to see it in
at the
Chicago.
at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that I've never been to an actual Broadway show on Broadway. I've been to Broadway shows when they come down to area stuff. So to have that as my first Broadway show,
Amazing.
to be 10 rows back on the elevation, you know, where the floor is flat and then it elevates up, and you're that first row, so you're at face level to the actors on stage, like 30 foot away, you know, well, no more than that, 50 foot away or whatever it is. Amazing. So for me, it was like
Has your life changed?
forever. Huh?
Has your life changed forever?
Actually, you know, honestly, yeah, I have a whole different perspective on theater. I mean, it's one of these, you know, there's moments in your life where they get burned in your brain as a postcard. That event, that experience is burned in my brain because it's one of these things where you go see a show and you watch the show and you enjoy the show. That I was on stage. I mean, in the sense of my mind, I was living what they were doing, and the music and the rap. When I was listening about Hamilton, the rap theater. What are you talking about? Wow, it's incredible. I can't even imagine how the actors memorized that stuff because it is nonstop, because there's no curtain. It just goes. And there's only 3 times where the lights go totally dark, and that's only for a moment before the next thing starts. So for the whole time up until the intermission, and then afterwards, another third, it's nothing but constant going on and on. It's crazy. Anyway, meanwhile, back at the ranch. It was amazing. I told Vanessa, I got to bring you to this. I don't care how much it costs. We got to get there. We're sitting by people who paid $1,000 for their seat, and we're like,
right? Yeah.
I can't thank Jen enough.
I don't pay a lot for shows, but for Hamilton, I'd probably go up to $350.
It's great.
That's still pretty cheap for Hamilton.
Yeah,
which
is why I didn't go.
We should give the tip though that Theo shared with us all on. I don't know what he was using. StubHub? Was he using
StubHub? Was it? I don't know.
If you stand across from the theater 20 minutes before and start paying attention to the pricing, I watched it happen. The ticket price dropped about $10 every minute. It was incredible. But you can't be too greedy, because that's what they were, a little bit too greedy and missed out.
Yeah. And actually, that reminds me who the third speaker was at my PR talk. It was actually PR for Visit New York. And they were saying that right now they're trying to use PR to give people a reason to visit the destination in January, post actual New Year's Eve. And so they're doing 2-for-1 Broadway tickets. They're doing Restaurant Week. They're doing a whole bunch of promotions around all the cool things that you can do in New York, even though it's frigid, which actually wasn't that bad while we were there.
Yeah,
It
was freezing. It was freezing.
I don't know what they do on the east side of Phoenix, Holly, but I did okay coming from the west side of Phoenix. But yes, it was definitely cold, but we weren't buried in snow, and that was my original fear. So,
I use the benchmark of telling people the efficiency use, and Stuart, you appreciate this because you already do a phenomenal job with your platform. If you want to know how successful your site is in usability on a mobile experience to a guest, use it on the corner in New York when you need to find something.
Right.
Okay. Because if with everything that's going on and all the and everything else, and if you have to go through 15 flavors to get to where you need to go or find what you need to find, or whatever, that it ain't working. So if you want what you're doing online to be as useful as possible and as user friendly as possible, then if we go through that acid test, then you know you're doing a good platform, you know, because it's easy, it's convenient, it's comfortable, it's functional, and it's valuable, you know, and so many platforms fail at that. So many things that we do on site that we create this navigation nightmare of people having to go through layer upon layer within our websites to find the aspect that they're looking for most about it. And I'm not saying that we turn into an app service provider from our mobile side, but I'm talking about the efficiency value of it, the consumer-centric value of it, that it's comfortable to navigate and use. I think that's what I consider to be an acid test of most of those kind of things. So, yeah.
We simulate that experience here when we're doing
really?
testing. So all the rest of the fuel can stand around me and just start screaming random stuff in my ears while I'm trying to.
Oh, I see. I thought that they just screamed in
just
your
like New York. Yeah.
Oh,
Banners in front of you flashing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Cars honking. The whole way. Yeah.
Yeah. We looked at. I was just making sure there's nothing else on the agenda because I did the loyalty one. Did anybody do the attribution breakout?
Yeah,
Lily?
that's the one that I was talking about.
Is that the one you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first half was great, and I did post a lot of the insights from the first half of that one.
We should, yeah. You know what? I'm going to take my notes that I had. I'm going to throw them up on this session one too, since we're jabbering about the conference as much as we are.
So I sat in a session that Bob put on. It was the Collaborate one. So the concept was neat. There were 6 tables, and each table was numbered 1 through 6, and there were 6 different topics. So one was attribution modeling. You know, there was a bunch of different stuff related to marketing, and you got to go in and you could pick any table to sit at, and you and the rest of the folks at that table got to discuss that topic for 15 minutes. So it was a really like learn from your peers situation, and then at the end, one of the people would put in the findings or the best practices into Menti. So they're going to repurpose that content. So I thought it was pretty cool. But I was helping moderate it, and everyone got to do one topic, switch, and then do a second topic as well. So you could.
You're
People
frozen.
chose the topics they did. Emma, shoot, happens every time.
No, you're fine. You're fine now. You're fine now.
I talk too fast. I'm faster than the internet.
That's what it must be. Yeah.
So some folks were picking, hey, this is the subject I'm most comfortable with. But a lot of folks were picking, hey, I want to go sit in the subject I'm least comfortable with because I'll learn the most, which I thought was a really good approach to it. But I sat on the attribution table twice just to see what the conversations were. And the mix of attendees, there was some brands, some big and small brands, some independents, different functions within the organizations. And it was amazing how both groups were talking about how they're really struggling with attribution and how they really feel overwhelmed, how they feel like they don't really have their arms around it. And everyone was admitting they felt like they were kind of pretending that they had it figured out when they really didn't. So it was a very earnest and honest conversation that people were sharing. So it was neat. And I think a lot of people felt left feeling like they weren't alone, like they felt like they'd been in this vacuum struggling with attribution, and they left feeling like, okay, well, it's not just me, which was something. But
I really think
HMI is going to
attribution
publish
is
the findings.
I think attribution is a huge opportunity for growth in terms of education, experimenting, looking at people's results and really sort of making some progress, I think, this year. We did that same model at the Sales Leadership Forum, but slightly different. There were 3 speakers in the morning, and I was one of them, and we each had, I think, a half an hour on our topic. And so we would present some, thought leadership and then some examples. And then in the afternoon, same thing. We broke up into these groups and we had to discuss best practices around each topic at these tables. And that's what was so cool is we had global salespeople, we had property salespeople, and we had regional, sales directors, and everybody's perspective coming together. It was a fantastic exercise. And then the best practices would get posted. From a speaker standpoint, it was also good to know what people heard and what they missed. Yeah. So that was incredibly valuable. But everybody loved that concept. I think we should do that.
That's a neat. That is a neat.
Yeah, Bob said he's going to do that regularly. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, not to, for the rarity of having Tammy with us, from an attribution question point of view, how do you guys, and not to display secrets, but just how do you tackle those questions that you get? I mean, I share the sentiment that Stuart just reflected on. There's sometimes I'm not saying bluffing, but I'm making massive assumption on some things because there just isn't a connect the dot on some data, and you have to imply based on confidence factors that this, although you can't directly connect it, is strongly implying that this created this,
Or had an influence at least.
Yeah, or had an influence.
Quantify the influence it had.
Exactly. And you're spot on, right? Attribution, I think, is one of the biggest challenges everyone faces. And then as we're talking to clients and looking at what they're doing previously and maybe trying to suggest some shifting of gears or things, you have to, how do you compare apples to apples year over year, right? If you're changing, like I've seen it happen where people change their attribution modeling, or my favorites, they change from GA to Adobe or vice versa. And so the platforms aren't even apples to apples. And so trying to really look at it and really holistically see with their marketing and what's working and what's not. We're really striving to try and do much more on the data-driven attribution. But even that, it's like, okay, what exactly does that mean? And how exactly do you calculate the percentages? And is it the same across the board? Or is it different for a brand versus an individual hotel and based on what they're doing? I think, to Lily's point, we should just put everything into national TV advertising and call it a day.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. The best I've come up with of how to try to create dysfunctional because there's two aspects of attribution that I find my most valuable. There is no combination yet platform that allows to do it from the data itself. You have to actually do the manual, put it together, and that is frequency and time decay. Those are my two favorites. And because if I can layer them over each other, I can give an implied impact value based on when they hit versus the time it took for them to hit. And I diminish the value, obviously, with the time decay. And then I also go over and diminish the value according to how many times it's used. So, and I mean diminished in the sense that as the frequency increases or decreases, whatever it may be, the time lowers the value sequence as it continues on. And so I actually literally take the data from both and put them over each other and try to imply that this channel during this time window with this pattern of engagement created a percentage value over the inception to completion timeline. And it's just slice of times. That's the frustrating part of it is it's massively painful to do because
I was going to say, how are you doing that?
Well, I take it out. Well, I use Google Analytics. Sorry, I'm not an Omniture fan. I know it's supposed to be magical and everything, but I hate trying to pull data out of it. It's just painful for me. Maybe because how you learn on Excel and just it's your favorite thing versus your not favorite thing. But I take a slice of time. I try to do event-driven sequence. Say, okay, if I'm going to put a stick in the sand, here's my event-driven sequence. This is what is the causation of traffic. These are my implications of channel contribution, whether it be my email campaigns, whether it be my PPCs, my paid, my meta search campaigns, whatever they are. These are my sequence modifiers. These are the ones that are coming into this timeline. This is my inception point of first contacts. And then I take the data out of each of those, okay, according to what I'm tracking of each of those, and put them up and then put that on the timeline. And then I go over and take the amount of times numerically as to each one of them and put that against that timeline. And then I look at each of the engagements of those on that timeline. But then what I do is if it's a 7, 21, 14, whatever the day sequence is that started and stopped it, I give percentages for the entire sequence. So each day has a percentage value of time. And then I give a percentage value of frequency based on the total number of frequencies. Does that?
So 99% of the people listening to this have no idea what you're talking about.
Sorry, I know. I probably went down a stupid little rabbit.
And
probably 105% of people don't.
Yeah,
right.
And the 1% is probably going, "Oh my God, that's going to take me 40 hours."
It's just not realistic, and you're doing a lot of manual stuff. And I think I just posted a link to an article I wrote last year on Hotel Executive about attribution modeling, and you touch on something that I think is important for people to realize, which is having multiple models. Not one is going to be perfect, and they're all going to be situational. And looking at your data in context is really important. So one of the conversations that was happening was, if something's top of funnel versus bottom of funnel, you really shouldn't be looking at it with the same attribution model because there are so many assumptions and so many variables. So if you're doing, say, time decay like how much and how quickly do you decay the value, right? That's an
Right.
arbitrary thing that you make.
Oh,
Frozen.
I'm a big fan of. All right, let the internet.
go ahead.
catch
Go
up.
ahead. We get to know. We get to know.
We've got up. So I'm a big fan of having multiple models and not manual, because I don't think anyone's going to spend the time to really analyze it, but looking at things in context and trying to understand, extract the meaning of the data versus saying this gave an exact ROI. Because we're all marketers. We all believe that advertising is going to move the needle, and we're trying to quantify that. But I think you've got to get rid of the assumption that you can get really precise with attribution model today. I think we'll get there. And deal with good enough is good enough. If it can show me trends, if it can show me what is working versus what isn't working, and I can make actionable decisions from it, then it's a model that works for me and my business. But I think people are too caught up in, I want a specific number. Give me, how much is this working? 42. You can't do that with the modeling where it works today.
No.
There's too many gaps in the data.
Yeah.
So,
No, I do this.
check
As a
it out.
I do this as a benchmarking where I do it
Yeah.
in enough points so I can use it as a tether. Just like, when you navigate a boat back in the day with the sextant and the stars, you take your bearing when you have the chance to see the stars, and you keep that bearing until the next time you take a next bearing. That's kind of why I take the effort to do this manually, is if I can put benchmarks on impact of conversions based on things that I know are similar to what I'm going to attempt to do next, I can make implied value propositions as to where I think my business is going to come from because of taking the time on that little slice of it. But you're absolutely right. This is not for the faint-hearted to say that I'm going to give you an exact number every time you ask me, because it's just not possible in the metrics, the capabilities we have right now.
Yeah, and anyone that is giving you an exact number is stealing attribution from someone else. Attribution depth is real. And a lot of vendors out there are doing that.
Going through the attribution models, and similar to your article here, Stuart, I think it was Dan who went through some of these. Anyway, in one of the events I didn't get a chance to grab slides from, I really liked the idea of the time decay and the position based. So given that I'm not sort of a expert, I'm curious to know, overlaying those two in some way, shape, or form, do you feel like that would be a relatively accurate model to go with? Because I do feel like with the time decay, maybe it doesn't give enough emphasis to the first touch point where they came and found you. But at the same time, I also think the recency is probably needs a little bit more attribution.
But that's the $1 million question, right? Because what I think and what you think might be different, and it's really about coming up with a model that you're comfortable with from a business perspective. Because some folks would argue, okay, with time decay, it is unfavorable to first click, and some people would argue, well, that first impression, whatever it is the catalyst, which without that, nothing else would have happened. So I want to give it more credit, which is why people like U-shape or J-shape or these different kind of combinations. But I really think you have to consider that. You have to consider position. You have to consider the timing, but you also have to consider frequency. And there's all these other variables that are contributing to it, which is again why there's not really a way to come to a magical number. It's got to be what your comfort level is.
The maddening part is though, everyone's doing last click and that's it. Like all of this
because that's easy, right?
I know.
Because it's
So
easy. And it's something I can point
40,
to on a
20,
spreadsheet.
40. I would just do 40 top, 40 first, 40 last, 20 in the middle.
Right. So a U-shape, right? Which a lot of people do. But what if there's like 20 middles? And what if we can't measure the actual first because it was maybe an impression, so it doesn't, and when they didn't click, maybe it's a display ad and no one clicked on it, but they saw it, but that view only exists in my Sojourn report. It doesn't exist in my Google Analytics report. So now my attribution model has no way to bridge those two together.
Right. And with UTM recodings and with scrubbings and with inaccuracy drops, you lose frequency pattern capabilities. You learn it can go into one pattern as recorded and on another one as unrecorded or re-recorded or redefined. And so now you got double attribution for two different sequences that didn't occur on one.
So I think we need a webinar on this.
Right, I totally agree. We could devote an entire topic to this.
Oh, it is. There's 10 primary attribution modelings right now, okay, that are defined. And all of them, to Stuart's point, if you overlay variations of each one of them, you're going to get different interpretations. And through collectively an overview of them, you're going to get an impression to whether it's black or white, on or off. It's going to be very simplistic, the things you get. Is it working or not working? And if it did work, which one worked better than the other? It's about what you get out of those.
But I will say, just kind of in wrapping up the topic, that if you haven't checked out Stuart's article, he does a great job here. I know I'm talking about you while you're right here, Stuart, but the factors to consider when you're selecting an attribution model and a nice summary of the takeaways. There's way too many opinion articles out there that just kind of leave you hanging with a lot of information. So thanks for writing this really well, Stuart, so that people can come to educated conclusions for their own business.
Yeah.
That-
What I like about your Stuart, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Not nicely
No,
about
keep going. I'll take all the compliments.
I'll let that elbow, Tammy.
I like how you broke out with each one, not only a quick snippet of what the model is, but based on that, in your scenario example, how would the revenue be attributed to each of the channels, which I think is really helps people that aren't Lauren, get a good visual on that. And I think, the challenge, and Holly, to your point, absolutely. I think there should be webinars on this, but because there's so many different models, I think the challenge, I don't think you're ever getting anyone to fully agree. You may like a U-shaped model,
Right.
someone else may like a J, someone else may just prefer last click because frankly, it's easy. And then as I tell people all the time, well, last click's going to steer towards direct or organic, and then your ownership's going to go, why the hell are we spending all this money? Everybody knows this anyway. Let's decrease our marketing spend.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to like the basketball analogy of it all. It's like as soon as the ball goes in play, we always like to give credit to the person that slam dunked it on the other end. But the person that put it in play, putting it to the right person who was defending the other person, that dribbled it to the other person, that passed it to the other person, that blocked it to the other person before the person eventually slam dunked it on the other end. You have to give, it's a team effort. There's multiplicities to what gave that one person the ability to hit the point at the end. Most people in general, basketball, give the credit to the person that slam dunked it. Hey, look how many points that he scored. Other basketball aficionados will look at the fact of if player X didn't block that other player at just the right time before he passed it over to this guy, he never would have been able to do that point. So
It's the butterfly effect.
yeah, it really is.
It's
all
really, really complex, right? And we're not even talking about how complex it really is, because when you think about it, we're also making the assumption that all revenue is equal, right? So we're not considering if this is a new or repeat guest. We're not considering the lifetime value, all these other things that really should go into part of this to make, because ultimately the why we're struggling with this is we're trying to make smarter decisions about how we.
Dude, you gave me a great idea. Thank you. You just gave me a great idea.
So I did. What was it? You want to
I've
share your great idea?
No, I've been struggling with something, and part of the problem was the fact I have been giving it equal value, and you just solved the puzzle for me. I need to fracture out the business because I have the ability to define repeat versus new, and what channel versus whether it was new or repeat. Email, you have this recurrence factor. PPC, you have a new creation factor. And the problem that I was having was value were getting skewed as to how much was being acquired or was gained on each of the channels versus the monies that was skewing the values. Mm-hmm. If I temper it with the repeatability versus new as to lifetime value versus repeat value, I just got to figure out the metric of what that value assignment would be. But that would balance out the ratio of cost versus acquisition based on the value of the revenue generated based on repeatability versus new.
So
that's what I was thinking too.
Half of what you said.
No, but I think that
You hurt my brain, Lauren.
if I were going to distill the conference down into a couple insights, it's that it was very similar to Rock and many of the other conferences that I attend, full of great information, most of which has been repeated multiple times and we're still not acting on. And frankly, we're an industry full of people who want to take the easy way out. And so my summary of the entire conference is do the hard things first, and you will be more successful than 95% of your competitors across the board. Don't look for the easy way out.
True
find a way
that.
to slog through everything, prioritize. We've talked about this a couple times. There's about 15 million things that you should be focused on right now. Is your website ADA compliant, GDPR compliant, and CCPA compliant? Thank you, Tammy, for educating us on that on day one. All 5 people who managed to show up to that. I felt so bad for you, but it's
Because
just not a sexy topic.
It's
Right.
hard and it's not
Google.
sexy.
It was
Yeah.
complete with Google. So, just are you going to focus on that? Are you going to focus on the human trafficking issues that Kat came and talked to us about?
Mhm.
Are you going to focus on sales, marketing, and revenue convergence and how to structure your department? Are you going to figure out your right attribution model? There's just not enough time in the day for all of these things. So, for all of our listeners, I encourage you to really sit down and figure out what is the one thing from my favorite book. What is the one thing you could do today that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? Focus on that thing till it's done, then ask the question again and keep moving.
Good
Sorry,
advice.
Sage
soapbox over.
advice.
I think you summed it up very well.
Sage advice. Yeah.
It's
Yep,
really
yep.
sage advice. And hopefully, I mean, the people that are listening to the show are people that are used to slogging through something because
Yes.
they put up with that gibberish, right?
That's
So
right. They wouldn't be
those are the
watching
kind of
this.
people that I think are going to take, right, they're going to take the most value out of the conference because they're the kind of people that are going to put in the work up front. I will say my other big takeaway is stop inviting Google to speak at the conference because they do not say anything. They play it way too safe, or encourage them to have a message when they come. Because I sat there for a 45-minute session where it was talking about here's some things Google's done, which is all public knowledge. In fact, Tammy's presentation had way more of what Google's done than Google's own presentation did. And then it turned into a sales pitch. Then it turned into, go and update your Google My Business and do Google Hotel ads. So I don't want to hear that from Google. I want to hear the latest trends, the latest data. How
Yeah,
about you,
That's what I
tell
miss.
me how many people searches now, because you haven't released that stat for over 2 years and it's still sitting at 20% and everyone's quoting this 20% number that's from 2 years ago. How about Google gives us that new data? That would be valuable. What they gave was a joke. Really,
That's what
really
I miss
embarrassing.
about the other
And to
Sean.
make it worse, they wouldn't even take questions. The guy said, if you have questions, come up to me afterwards and I'll answer the questions. He wouldn't take public questions. That's not acceptable.
See, the other, and to Holly's point, the other Sean was a little bit more bold, and he was always trying to bring something to when he was asked to speak that was not commonly known, and it was
Right.
really nice when he did that.
None
And
of that.
it was a challenge because obviously they can't divulge, their I mean, they don't even know them, but it seems like now what Google, that Sean was a Google employee from day one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now it seems like they're bringing in industry people into Google. And so they're coming with slightly different perspectives. And so they're not really looking at the core to be able to share
Well,
that
they-
sort of
They
information.
came with an agenda. The agenda was to get more people to use Google Hotel ads.
Yeah.
That was
Actually, you know what? As a compliment
what
to
the whole
Facebook,
presentation was.
the night before at the Adrian's, she was more open about Facebook's intent with hospitality than I've seen Facebook talk about in quite a while. Remember when she was on stage when they were giving the award and she was talking about Facebook and the future of Facebook and so forth with hospitality? She was more open about that than I thought that I've seen from Facebook in a while. Usually they're the ones that do just what Google just did. Hi, no questions. We're going to tell you what you already know.
Yeah.
We're up here just because we want to put our label in front of you and remember
Right.
by Google,
And I get it, right? From the committee who puts the conference together, from their perspective, having headliners like Google is important, right? It's an attraction, it's a draw. I just wish we would scrutinize what they're going to present better. We should have a conversation with them up front and try to understand what value proposition they're going to get.
We do.
We
but
should
we
scrutinize harder with Google.
Yeah,
Screen
we
the
need to
whole
obviously.
presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We cover the content pretty extensively, but
They-
we don't control at the last minute.
I was very happy with my choice to attend Tammy's presentation on GDPR, CCPA, and ADA compliance instead, which I now feel much more educated on. And thank you, Tammy, for putting together the unsexy topic and making it approachable.
I told Neil that I am a huge advocate. The one thing I gave him a compliment on when I got to see him at the conference, Tammy, was when you all put together your webinars, they are content driven. which is phenomenal because
Yep.
I will sign up for, if you're going to tell me that's going to rain, I want to sign up so I can hear what your webinar is about. And that you end up going in, it's just nothing more than a perpetual sales pitch. Yeah. And all about platform centric, serviceabilities and all this other junk and no real meat to it. And the statistics they pop up for validation are, I read that yesterday in some news feed, there's nothing there. You guys bring always to the table functional, useful stuff. But news last one that I was able to hit when you guys first opened up the CCPA conversation was literally my benchmark of understanding CCPA better than I had ever done before. I mean, you guys do phenomenal when it comes to content. Field Travels podcast does that too, Stuart, just so you know, dude.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of parallels between our philosophies. I think we're both some kind of companies that believe in helping, not selling.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's ultimately how you build better.
100%. Except
that's
unless
why
you
we're all
keep getting
here.
frozen.
A lot of the webinars.
Yeah.
I know. Poor Stuart keeps freezing up. Well, I told Stuart at the conference too, and I'm a little behind in my podcast listening, but he did a great one a few weeks back now, but on gift cards and why hotels should have gift cards. And I still haven't had a chance to listen to the booking engine one. I'm listening to Bob Iger's book, Ride of a Lifetime, and that took priority on the plane coming home. By the way, Lauren, back to your comments earlier about having to work through every department to rise up and take on those roles. One of the things I was thinking about in Bob's book, he took over ABC Entertainment, never having had that entertainment experience, and he talks a lot about what he did and the people under him that really helped him rise to that level. So sorry,
there's always exceptions to every aspect, and there's some organizations that require. I have the privilege, and not to throw names because you know how I've been on with names, but the new president of Alhoa, Cecil. Anyways, sorry.
I'm
Cecil.
so glad you're afflicted with the same thing I am.
But he has no hospitality experience. But he makes it his priority, which is why he was talking with me, which I thought was great, is he wants to start connecting with people that he wants to be able to ask questions to that aren't necessarily answering to him so that he doesn't have that political bias of an answer. That, hey, I'm going to ask you a question. I want to get an answer, not whether or not it, you flavor it so that you keep your job. And I appreciate that about people. And that's an attribute of true leadership is if you don't have the ingrown experience of every discipline that creates the entity that you are, then at least have yourself surrounded with people that can give you the insights, knowledge, and capabilities that you need to answer and have the perspective. I mean, Ed, if he was still here, he says this all the time, that he always applauds companies that hire outside of the industry to have that perspective of bringing something fresh and different to the process. You need that perspective. So yeah, when I say I respect people that work through the entities to have a solid, that's in the logistic infrastructure category. Leadership itself, I think, has many flavors, this being one of them. But from a getting things done, you can't ask a revenue manager to revenue manage and not know what that means, or go market this, go sell this, and not know what that means. You need to have a functional awareness of the processes involved with that as well. But yeah, there are people that excel by surrounding themselves with talent. So yeah,
It's much easier. Hey, speaking of which, I have to go.
no.
Lily, did you get my email?
Just now?
No, yesterday.
Not yet.
Look in your spam. Look in your spam because I need to make sure that you get it. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Holly, before
Got
you go, two things I'm going to ask. One is, tell me everything about influencer sales that you need to ever tell everybody how to find you. But the second is also about your program that you're doing with HSMA. So people are aware that there's still only 3 seats left in the first section, and there's more afterwards. So just those things.
It's Hotel Digital Marketing Essentials, and it is based loosely on the CHDM, the Certified Hotel Digital Marketing class. You get the study guide when you sign up for this web series, but we kind of go beyond. And one of the things that's kind of interesting, we kick it off, and I'm just going to finish it up today. I'm a little bit late, with a history of the internet as it applies to hotels, which is really fun. I will share that with you guys so that you can see it. And we do that as a context. So this is what's happened in the internet as it applies to hotels. It's very hotel centric. These are the key points that changed the shape and why we do things a certain way. And then in the very first week, we are focusing on strategy, on the bigger picture of how and why you need to create a strategy, which I am a little bit, the CHDM leaves out a bit of. We really focus a lot on here are all of the different elements to it. And so I wanted to start with, here's the bigger picture. This is how you put it together. And then the next 4 weeks really are focused on paid, your website, and we cover SEO and sort of at a high level, certainly, because we only have 6 hours total. But we cover SEO, hotel blogs, booking engines, user friendliness, booker friendliness. So we cover that. Then we go into earned, which I'm talking a lot about, the concepts behind social and how they're driving some search results and how they interrelate and how you use them to amplify and how you listen. And then we talk about paid, and then we wrap up with intermediaries, vendor relationship, and a little bit of communication, the role of the e-commerce director. They can't talk to their peers and the people that report to them in a language that they don't understand so that they won't bug them. They need to be responsible for communicating the strategy, the hows and the whys of why we're doing things. So it's a 6-week program taught by Dan Waxman and myself. And the first one is February 3rd, I think. And it'll run every Monday for an hour. It's via Zoom. And we keep the class size small so that we can be interactive. And you don't have to work hard if you attend the class, but you have the option of working hard. So we meet with you for a week and then we give you some other stuff to do throughout the week. So it can really be about a 2 or 3 hour commitment if you want to get the absolute most out of it. If you don't have the time, you can spend an hour a week with us and then save the other stuff for later, but it's really worthwhile if you delve into the other stuff. And then if you want, at the end, you take the CHDM exam if you're signed up for it or not. You can take the class separate from the CHDM exam. That is, and you can find actually information about that and my influencer sales program, which really takes sales and brings in quite a bit of digital at my website, scoutsimply.com. I've sort of married everything and then it's an offshoot if you want to get more in depth on influencer sales. So Holly at scoutsimply.com. I gotta go.
Bye, Ollie.
Bye. Great
Proud of you. Tippy bartenders and servers, they're working for you.
Exactly.
Holly,
Goodbye.
thanks for making it. Always a joy. Thank you.
So fun to be here and so fun to see you guys this week. It was great.
It was great to see you as well. Great to see you as well. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. What
Holly and
happened
I
to
always
Ed?
have to go out of town, and yeah, I don't know. Ed just fell off the face of the earth there.
You know, if we were talking about the conference, he didn't make it. He felt like he was the orphan child. He probably left. He's like, yeah.
So I do just want to throw in here. I know we probably wait till the end, but I have a competing rut-row I think we should cover today. I know we're not spending a lot of time on the articles, but I think this one's.
And I feel bad because, you know, Robert does go through the effort. And to Robert, thank you. I know you said you weren't going to make the show today, but you still made the effort, to make the list and distribute it and so forth. And I know it's no easy. You don't pull them just out of your hat. You actually do a very good curated list, which is why you have literally hundreds, if not already. I think you were clicking up into thousands or something of people that are subscribed to this now that you send it out to, which is a testament to the quality of it. So, but I have no disrespect that we're not hitting it. It's just, it's fresh in our minds, the conference, and it was a chance for, since we get to see each other, it's kind of like fun to debrief it afterwards, because that's half the fun of going to these things, is talking about, what did you get? I don't know, what did you get? Did you say what that person was wearing? Oh my God, look at Stuart, he's drunk. No, oh, sorry, that was my little voice inside.
I went to bed before any of that happened. Stuart was giving Holly and I a bad time because we chose not to go. Did Holly end up going out, or did she go? Because I was back in my room and in my pajamas and in bed. Probably.
Yeah, she didn't go.
No.
Absolutely.
When I showed up to Don't Tell Mama, the piano bar, with the amazing voiced server that we had that was singing, I don't know, coloratura level notes. I mean, he was, Stuart was in the end of this long paraded table. He was King Stuart at the end, looking over like, I don't know, what was it, 14 people or something?
Yeah.
Riveted by Stuart's dialogue.
It was funny. I was sitting next to someone, we were chatting, and somehow podcast came up, and I said, well, on our podcast, and she's like, wait, you do a podcast? And I was like, yeah. And she's, what's it called? The Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast. And her eyes about popped out of her head. She's like, that's where I know your voice from. I listened to that show. I had no idea that was you that I was talking to. So it was kind of funny.
Oh, hey, as really something else that was really cool, there was a guy that owns a hotel in Phuket, Thailand,
Mhm.
and he went to Rocket I think he caught us in Orlando, was so enamored with the conversation that he came to the conference to continue listening to everything, and because of the show and everything else too. He's
Wow.
now, yeah. So it's really, I mean, back from Phuket, Thailand, all the way to New York to see us again. It's like, dang, that's awesome. So,
Yeah.
and yes, I don't know his name.
I was very pleased to meet all of our fans at the conference. That was
Yeah.
really, really fun
Mhm.
for me as well.
Yeah.
So thank you to everybody. I know
It is fun to run across people do this. Okay, so you had a rut row compared to the rut row that Robert gave. So what is your rut row?
Yes. So my rut row, and then we should probably do the boop afterwards because I feel like this is going to be a depressing topic, is coronavirus. So I don't know if you've been following this, but there is a pretty big coronavirus outbreak. They have no idea what virus this is, but it's they've isolated probably a market where it began in China, but they now have 2 confirmed cases in the US already and several more suspect from people who've traveled abroad. Highly contagious human to human, and they're liking this to SARS and MERS. So I think that it's something that we need to be ahead of because SARS and MERS weren't enough to have any sort of major economic impact, but this is starting to impact markets. It's going to impact people's travel as they will be a little bit nervous probably of getting on a plane. We may see more of those face masks coming out, and I think it would be good for hotels in advance to just reassure people that they've put into place extra operational practices to ensure sanitation and things like that. But they're literally at the point where one of the articles that I read said that they're beginning to screen travelers from China for coronavirus before letting them into the general population.
Oh, there
So
were, yeah, three.
Very
They emptied up past 3 airports already. It's already
Yeah.
up to 6 now.
Yeah.
Airports are doing thermal scans on people arriving. And actually, I can attest to firsthand experiencing exactly what you're just talking about because I wear a mask when I'm on the planes. When I'm traveling during flu season, I always throw a mask on. One is because then they can't tell who's snoring. Just saying. And the other is that the humidity of the mask makes it so you don't dry out as easily, and that helps me a little bit. But when I had the mask on, I actually had a person that was in all over was looking at me, and they're like, "Are you sick?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just doing this so I don't get sick." And they're like, "Oh." Because it's not one of those paper masks. It's one of those ones that cloth and so forth. So it's not like a medical mask. But people are already heightened to the such and such whatever. But yeah, just from a business point of view, what happens? What happens if the place gets pulled? What happens if people start deciding that it's not about just going flying?
Right.
And it's not just going to drive market. It's the fact they don't want to go anywhere because they don't want to get the heightened exposure.
Exactly.
Parks, destination points that have groups of people, primary destinations. What happens?
Yeah. So I think it's really important, especially for hotels that benefit a lot from Asian travel right now. They're going to be the hardest hit, probably. Those markets may be seeing some decline. So in the short term, in the interim, potentially focusing a little bit more on local travel, European travel, to kind of shore yourself up against a potential drop in Asian travel that we're expecting. But also beyond that, it may spread a little bit further. So having sort of a contingency plan in place. And going back to what we said earlier when we were talking about budgets and what's going to happen with the market, this is the exact kind of scenario where you need that airplane exit row strategy in place, ready to go. What are you going to do if demand suddenly falls, and how are you going to react? So if you don't already have that plan in place, I think it's really important that you get ahead of it. This has not been declared as a worldwide emergency yet, but I think realistically, we're probably all expecting that it may emerge as an international health emergency. So it's important to be ahead of it now.
Well, the thing that scares me about how they're rolling this is exactly, and this is where Hollywood imitates life or life imitates Hollywood. Part of the protocol of any sort of pandemic issue is the slow, progressive, non-panicky rolling of
Right.
reaction so that
Exactly.
it doesn't get the negative perception of fear or panic, which can create its own cascading issues. As
Right.
the slow, okay, we did 3 airports, then very quickly they did now 6 airports. We only have 1 case. Oh, now we have 2 cases. We have suspected case. It's and it may be all true and factual and everything else, but if we went over and turned on the TV saying all airports now have thermal scanning, nobody from China is allowed into the country. Anybody that wear a mask whenever you're in public areas, people will be like, let's go buy gas.
Right, exactly.
Move to the
And I
back.
think that's why I felt that it was important to bring it up on this week's show and not kind of wait for it, because I can almost guarantee that by next week's show, there will be at least 5 confirmed cases in the US, probably more. So it's important that we take this time to, again, along those lines, we don't want to panic. It's not time for panic, but it is time to plan ahead for what impact this could have and be knowledgeable and informed and stay on top of it.
Well, I follow Dr. Stewart's advice, which is alcohol kills everything, including brain cells. So I do the medication that's
Coming off like an alcoholic on this episode. I really do not drink that much.
I just so
Clearly
enjoy
missed
relaxing,
wherever
having fun,
this came from.
drinking $9 bottle beer at that mama's place. I got the bill for 2 beers. I'm like, what? I didn't buy the bar.
It's because I'm from Papua New Guinea or something.
Papua New Guinea. I wasn't feeling it, I forget.
Yeah.
More tax and
But yes, in that case, Robert's Rut Row was the speaking of forget again, the JW Marriott wants out of Bomboy. They're going to sue for it. Which there was two. Okay, going back to the conference, there was 2 things. One, I didn't like the TripAdvisor's guy. I didn't like him. That was just BS. I thought he was just. He had this attitude. He was doing us a favor by even being there. I don't know what it was, but he was also talking so high altitude that do you realize you're talking about a marble and not the planet, right? He just seemed so out of touch with the context of what he was talking about.
I went to the TripAdvisor table. They had a stand there. I was chatting with those guys. I was like, so what's your strategy against Google? Because it's clear that they're trying to squeeze you out of the market in the OTAs. And I mean, he looked like a deer in headlights. It was kind of a funny reaction. He's like, yeah, we're trying to figure it out. But it was very clear there wasn't any
Which is
kind
also
of
Robert's
strategy.
headline story about what TripAdvisor shake up and executive shake up and splintering themselves and so forth right now. And Stuart, I give you full credit for this. You have been a persistent pointer of TripAdvisor, saying you called it when they went over and jumped the shark, and that was 2 years ago. You were very quick about pointing out how
When
quickly
they start focusing on what made them big, they were focused on the guest, and that's what was their success. And as soon as they flipped to trying to chase Wall Street, numbers, that's when they jumped the shark.
Yes, yeah.
It's been a long time coming for sure.
Yeah, but the Rut Row for that, I guess there are fractures in even the Ivory Tower that they feel like the Bomboy is not to their benefit. And yes, having had to run hotels that were high reward program hotels, it's painful because you can't push them away, but you can't yield correctly either. And yes, if you're above 95% occupancy, you can go over and create what would be your bar, minus margin, blah, blah, blah. But still, you can't truly be all that you should be if you're constantly having to feed people by redemption. And I think from that, and then from the standards requirements, and anybody that travels internationally compared to domestically, there are different standards, quality standards, service standards internationally at some hotels that you dream about having domestically. I mean, people that they have lifetime occupations before they're a front desk person, that they have to rise and spend so much time, and they have 15 languages under their belt, and they're amazing people. And yet we'll go over and say, wait a minute, can you fog a mirror? Good, you're front desk. There's just standard levels that are so different in some worlds. And I think that they're holding up saying, listen, we're better than what you say we are. We're feeding people that we don't want to feed because we're having to redeem so much and so forth and so on. And we don't want this program. We don't want this.
Yeah, I have a little bit of problem with the way they're handling it, though, because I feel like you went in with your eyes open. When you signed up with that franchise, you knew that existed. So it's like, why are you whining about it now?
Their argument is
You should have been independent.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Stuart. You froze, and so I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, shut up was always good.
Go for it. I'm done.
I think their argument is, and I'm on the fence. I mean, I'm just reading the article now, but that with the combination of the Marriott and Starwood programs, and they've changed the rules, that's really what's led to this unhappiness among the gap. So I agree with you, right? Like, normally it's like you went in, if you didn't go in eyes wide open, that's your fault. But their argument is that there's been a lot of
To
change
change the rules, yeah.
that has, or at least that's one of their arguments. So
Yeah, no, I agree with them on that part of it by far. And for those that are listening, we will share all the article points, the ones we didn't get to by Robert, and that are always good, which are value to the show that we hit to with. But this okay. We got to do the boop. We got to do the boop. Let's do the boop. Boop boop. Where is it? I got to grab the link. Hold on. How you are changing the travel industry? Yes, you.
I like this one. I don't know that it's necessarily a comprehensive survey based on where it's coming from, but I thought that a lot of it is similar to what we've already been hearing about what people want in travel, but I felt like it was just a little bit more specific in what you're asking for in 2020. So I liked it.
I think, and then this goes to something I've first-hand experienced on this trip, just as to give some reference points to some things. And I'm not to the points that they're pointing out things like you're not going to just the biggest touristy destination stuff. You're being ecologically mindful of what you're doing when you're traveling now. I mean, there's lots of points to this article, but I noticed two things when I went to, because I flew out of Newark, which, by the way, Tammy, I apologize. I really wanted to attend your on Tuesday, but when my flight came into Newark, and I totally mislabeled the timetable for me to actually get from Newark Airport. Especially since I try to do things like I like riding trains and stuff. I don't want to pay $90 or $120 for Uber when I can go over and spend $15 to take the New Jersey Transit and then hop on a sub and make it up. But so by the time everything got into the room, it was literally time to press the clothes and go over and meet Sexy Stewart in a tuxedo for the Adrians. So the thing I saw when I was at Newark Airport on the way out was, one, I found out that homeless people like going to the airport. And they just sit around until vendors come on and say, hey, we need the table. And they go off somewhere. So I saw one person buy the person lunch saying, no, he's just waiting for me to buy him lunch. I bought him lunch, which I thought was very nice. And then the second was the place I was at, Cheeseburger, go figure. They give you these big bags to throw your food in because maybe you're going to the airplane or whatever it is, but there's these big bags. And while I sat there, 4 people brought the bag back to the counter after they were done because they weren't bringing it to the plane. They were just eating it there, but that's how they dispensed the food, was just throwing it in a bag. There was no trays or anything. They just kept throwing it in a bag to bring the bag back so they could reuse the bag. Now, I had not seen that before. Usually people just leave, first off, normally they just leave their junk on the table and you gotta, clean it off yourself to get to use the table. They, best is they throw it away in an overstuffed trash bag because the person that should be dumping the trash is over there on their phone by the trash bin because they're on break. But none of that worked. It was all nice, and then people were nice, and actually everybody that I met was nice. And the fact that these people bring their bags back to the countertop to be reused, I think, is a sentiment to this boop. Is like people are becoming aware that this stuff doesn't go away, that it does go someplace, it does impact something, and it's going to impact them. And so maybe there's something they can do as a person of one that can make a difference if everybody starts looking at it that way. Instead of going to Venice while it's slogging around in water, is to go to a secondary destination market, or make sure that when you go, you don't leave a carbon footprint as best you can. So I thought it was pretty neat in that sense. Sorry, pontificating. What do you think, Stuart? How's things in New Zealand? What do they do?
It's interesting though, right? Because I think in theory, a lot of people are saying they want off the beaten path and they want to avoid the crowds. But there's a joke in Myrtle Beach that people say, and they probably do it in other destinations too. But I've heard a lot of my wife's family who traditionally would vacation in Myrtle Beach, and they say no one goes to Myrtle Beach anymore because it's too crowded.
Right.
It's like, well, the people are saying they're going to go other places, but where are they really going? So, but I do think there's an opportunity. If you look in like Italy as an example, cities like Napoli have become really popular in the recent years. Not that they weren't, on the radar of a lot of people, but you typically, if someone was going to Italy, they probably hit Rome and Venice and Florence. Maybe some off the beaten path like a Cinque Terre or something. But for the most part, Napoli was an afterthought or just omitted, and they really started to creep up there. So I think if you can get if you're in a destination that's a secondary or tertiary destination, and you can work hard with for people to come, I think you can have a lot of success, especially now as more of the younger generations are looking for more adventurous stuff in not the normal touristy stuff. I think there's an opportunity, but you've got to create the why. You've got to create that reason for people to travel to you versus somewhere else.
And I think too, like this really comes back. I was just thinking about this as I was going through the airport back and forth to New York. On my layovers, I have a tendency to look for fast food over anything else in the airport. And the psychological reason that I do that is I know exactly what to expect.
Yep.
I don't have to worry about, is it going to be the kind of barbecue sauce that I like? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? So even though I prefer to not eat fast food, it's what I specifically look for in an airport because it takes away some of the stress of trying to make a choice. So like your example of Myrtle Beach, Stuart, I think that there's so many choices out there that people struggle to be steered towards a new place that they haven't heard of. And at the end of the day, just end up booking what everybody else is booking because they don't even know where to start.
Yeah, for sure. There's a reason McDonald's has more restaurants than any other chain, right? It's not because no one would tell you that McDonald's has the best cheeseburger in the world.
Right.
If they do, they need their head examined. But it's consistent. You know exactly what you're going to get.
Right. Well, like the people who were sitting at the table. So remember that people from Hudson, Hudson Bay, Hudson Valley, North New York. They were talking about their marketing their marketing efforts, because they're becoming to be a destination. They're growing. That people, they're discovering this beautiful place, and they're on the top of the highest mountain or hill within it, and they're becoming this place that people want to go to. But how to identify themselves? We're talking about social platforms and everything. How do you augment your messaging to amplify what you are in your destination when people don't know to even look for your destination yet?
Yeah.
And how do you create that voice within your own and for yourself and for your destination? It was a fun conversation. Stuart had great insights for them. He told them how to save the world.
I also told them that don't worry when you don't understand what Lauren says, because no one understands what Lauren says.
Yeah, I'm over there ranting and raving, and Stuart's just sitting going, yeah, but let's take all of that and go this one thing. Here you go.
The thing I love about you, Lauren, is it's awesome because you take things to the extreme in this like perfect utopian environment. Like if the world worked the way it's supposed to work, you would be the president of the world, because you have the most brilliant ideas, and theoretically, in theory, they're like communism. Your ideas are like communism, right?
That's
in theory, they're perfect, but the problem is, as soon as they come into reality, they fall apart.
They can fall apart. God knows they would be. Yes. No, actually, I work in a world where I'm global, and the people that keep me sane are the linears, which is like, that's right, but we're going this way. but yeah, this way. That's what we're at. All right. Well, yes, we're at that time, about almost 2 hours. Is there anything that we missed out of the show for people for next year to be aware of, or anything like that, or any insights left that we didn't already hit?
No, I mean, I would iterate again what we said before the show, which is this is one of the best, one of the events I really look forward to every year. From a networking perspective, it's probably the strongest in terms of the who's who there. And every year I meet new, wonderful, intelligent, smart people that I learn a lot from. The sessions are always solid. Although this year I was probably a little disappointed in terms of there wasn't any big ideas that shocked me, but there was enough for me to keep wanting to come back again year after year. So I definitely would put this on your calendar if it's one that you haven't done before.
Yeah, it was my first year, and I would definitely come back next year. For me, I mean, having gone primarily to revenue management conferences historically, it was really nice to have a broader perspective without being completely isolated from the revenue management discipline. It was really nice to be able to learn a little bit more about what's going on the side of marketing, PR, and sales.
Yeah. I agree with that. How is it from the other side? You're on the stage, Tammy, and you're walking around with new hardware. And
it was a great conference this year. No, look, the lightning rounds. I have to tell you, if for those of you that speak that have not done that, and as soon as I agreed, and Julie sent me you have to do this, and by the way, I need the outline by this date, the president,
Mhm.
I actually, my email back to her was, so be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It was a lot of work.
Yeah.
It really stretched my comfort zone because I am not known for being concise, and those 20 seconds go by really fast. But I'm so glad I did it. It really pushed my comfort zone, and I don't know that I'll do it again, at least not anytime soon. But it was a good experience.
It is one of the toughest. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
You
is
made
one
it
of the
look
toughest.
easy, Tammy.
You did. You did a great. Really,
Yeah,
timing was
we did,
perfect with it.
yeah.
See, you did it better than I, because the first year we did that format, I was the first one that did it, and I cheated. I did a Kobayashi Maru, Stuart. I changed the rules. Well, what it was is you have the total time frame, and you're supposed to, each slide is supposed to be equal in time length.
Yeah, and you did.
Right. I went over and modified the time sequence of which slides I wanted to talk longer on versus the other, and then I did a secret progress bar on the bottom that was just on the very bottom edge, so I could tell when the slide was going to change, so I could wrap up my statement on the page before I jumped to the next one. And so some slides were longer in time than other ones, but it still was only 6 minutes, so I still was concise. So I kind of just modified the rules.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Stuart.
The year I got to do it, I was lucky. It was a 7-minute thing, but they didn't auto advance the slides. We had control of the slides, so I really got the easier version of it the year that I did.
Well, I don't know, and I won't call out but somebody did a little cheating and did do their own advancing, which was fine. I thought all the presentations were great. They were fantastic topics, and they were at least they were different enough. I thought it was a good variety. The one thing I had found a timer, I was trying to find, if anyone knows of a timer that will just buzz on your watch every 20 seconds. I found them on my phone, and I was going to have my phone in my pocket buzzing me 2 seconds before the slide advance. That's what I was trying to do. And I go to get mic'd up, and the guy says, no phone, that looks bad on stage. And I'm like,
Well, I'll give you my the PowerPoint secret progress bar thing on the bottom, because all it is you put a little square of a rectangle on the bottom, slide it just to where it's above the bottom edge of the screen, and then put a timer of how much it appears on the screen. So you can look at the bottom, and it's just this slow progress color line that goes across, so you know how much time you have left. Just saying.
I probably need some of that. I am always struggling a little bit with timing myself, so I'm not ready for the lightning round yet because I get too excited about certain parts of my presentation, and then other times I get so excited about the next slide I forget it's on the next slide. Talk about all of it.
Yeah, you talk ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, this become a surprise. I have a problem talking and keeping contained, so I tried to use every cheat I could.
We know.
Yeah,
Yeah, we know.
No, it's a surprise, right?
Yeah, but it definitely takes extra practice for me before I go and speak to make sure that I'm within the right timing.
All I know is
That
I'm really
one especially needs a lot of practice to get it down to 7 minutes, because you can't have any tangents. I am the kind of person, when I'm presenting, a new thought will pop in my head and I'll go off on a little sidetrack. Yeah. You cannot do that in these things at all.
Yeah. Hey, all I know is I got to give Stuart a big old bear hug when I was there, so I was all happy.
That was fun. Yeah. Highlight of the show.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that in mind, Tammy, absolute joy that you popped on. Thank you so very much for making the time today. Really, honestly, and please, if you want to know more, get in contact with you, more about Milestone, where can they go and find all this kind of good, cool stuff?
Yeah, so our website's milestoneinternet.com is the best place to find out. I'll also put a link here in the chat. You were talking about content, just shameless plug. We have our Top Trends webinar coming up, not next week, the week after, January 29th. So if anybody wants to come listen in, there'll be a lot of great things related to some of the stuff we talked about at the conference, but also in addition to Banu, who's our president and founder, Bill Hunt. If you don't know who he is, he's a big SEO. He's a president at Back Azimuth Consulting is his company, but we're doing it through Search Engine Journal, so it'll be a pretty good webinar. But I'll put the link in there if he wants to find it.
Yeah. Please keep us always informed with the webinars. I will always put you guys' webinar link on our show, always. So as we go forward, and just as they come up, if I'm not already grabbing it and throwing it up, because I always automatically try to attend any of them that you're popping up, and if I can't attend, hoping that I get to replay it anyway. Like I said, it's a genuine compliment. This isn't just. I love the webinars you guys put together, because I always learn something out of it, and it always gives me benchmark of information. So I will always be happy for it. But yes, yeah, Milestone. And please say hi to everybody for me. I know I got to see nobody and see hi to Banu, so please say hi to her for me when you talk to her. Lily, people want to know more about you and TCRM and what's the new one? I don't. You gave me a
Oh,
card.
you got TCRM.
You gave me a
TCRM.
card.
You're
You're the
making
hard
It's
one.
on my
making
suitcase.
progress.
Think up. Think up. Sorry.
Yeah,
Think up.
Can't really see it. Think
Yeah.
up. Yeah. No, absolutely. So you can find me at tcrmservices.com for total customized revenue management, where we do day-to-day task force and revenue management services there. And then also our consulting division, Think Up Enterprises, where we do assessments, technology projects, etc. And in case you missed it in the flurry of activity from the marketing conference, our website is finally live. Yay! So we're just linking all the articles on the articles page for everybody so that they can click through to those. But outside of that, please feel free to go to thinkupenterprises.com and check it out. Would love your feedback.
Awesome. And for the award-winning podcast creator and founder and cool plaque on the back wall man himself, and Mr.
That's
Sturbo.
gonna stay there every week. Yeah. Check out
Where-
fueltravel.com. That's the mothership where you can find out anything about us. The podcast is fueltravel.com/podcast. It's cleverly named. But you can also search for hotel marketing anywhere you listen to podcasts and you will find our content.
And by the way, Lily, I have to start learning the fact that I'm losing identity in this show because 3 people came up to me at the conference. And not that there actually were a lot of people that came up going, hey, I love the show, blah, blah, blah. But 3 people in particular came up and said, oh, you're on the show with Lily.
That's funny.
I'm like,
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you to all my fans. I appreciate you all. I'd like to thank
What we
my
didn't tell you, Lauren, is behind your back, we refer to it as Lily's show now. Just
Lily's
so
show
you-
now? Okay, yeah.
That's what we all call it.
That's all good. It's all good. But no, it is. And thank you. You see, I mean, we have people that join us and decide something, and then we have other engagements depending on topics and so forth. But I always sincerely appreciate when people come up and they're like, oh, I love the show. Or, oh yeah, I watched the show and and or they'll have a question about it. I was going to ask, but I wasn't in the chat. I was on Facebook. I saw you on this, And so for all those things, we always answer any email that comes up or anything, please. And if you have suggestions of topics and conversation, obviously, as a matter of fact, one of the terms we kind of floated out there that we're still quite coalescing on is, in addition to Robert's list, we just don't want to just spout news stuff. We like topic-driven things. So we're going to try to see if we want to start looking a little bit forward, because one comment I did get from some people is they love the show, but they don't know what to expect. They love that aspect, but they also would appreciate sometimes knowing a little bit ahead of time what y'all going to talk about. So,
Yeah.
other than
By the way, neither do we. So, yeah.
right? Yeah. So
This
we
is
might
gonna
be
be
able to start loading up.
show.
Yeah. So we might just start throwing ahead saying, hey, this month we're going to talk about. Speaking of this month, this is the last one we'll have of this month, so we want to be mindful of the fact, and just because Kat isn't here, we don't want to forget it. This is Human Trafficking Month, Awareness Month, that we need to make sure that we don't forget that it's not a month of focus, but it is the month that it's recognized for, that we keep this perpetual awareness forward. If you're not already thinking about training your teams and your staff about looking for the warning signs of these things, you need to. It is probably more important than any legality associated with things like GDPR and CCPA in the world, as it is the life and rights of other humans. So please, if you're not already knowing about what this is, there are links in our show for this. I don't have them immediate to throw up here, but they are on the other show. I'll make sure they're in this show links as well, if you go look for this link later. So that you can go over and find more information about how to train your staff and your team and what awarenesses are and so forth, and be mindful of that. It is critical that we always keep that we are not an unwilling contributor to that crisis. So with that in mind, not on a negative note,
Can I
but
ask you a question there, Lauren? Are we not having a show next Friday?
Is it still in the month?
It's still January next Friday.
is it really?
Just barely.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, you know what? We'll just say that all over again. No, I thought it was February next week. Sorry. Wow. Well, I can't remember names. I can't remember dates. Okay. No, I'm not getting old.
It's not necessarily a strong point of this group today in general, but that's okay.
No.
That's why we research this onto article lists that we can refer back to, guys.
Yeah. Okay. So next week's still January, so it's still work. But hey, you know what? We'll say it all over again. If you want to know the show or all previous 232 of them, you can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There you find the link to this show and a link to this year's shows and archives to the past 6 years. lots of shows. Anyway, with that, thank you everyone, and thank you for your time. And we'll see you next Friday, 11:30 Eastern, for show number 234 in January. Thank you,
And I'll
everyone.
see you all in February.
Oh yeah, to see you in
Bye,
February.
guys.
All right, bye now.
See ya.
Bye.